There comes a quiet moment when the keys rest untouched and the world feels slightly farther away. Losing the ability to drive can feel like losing freedom itself. But isolation is not the answer. Dignity, connection, and independence can still live fully at home. There comes a quiet moment when the keys remain where they are, not because they were lost, not because someone took them away, but because reaching for them no longer feels natural. At first, it doesn't feel important. Just another small adjustment among many, a choice made for safety, a decision postponed rather than announced. But over time, that small change begins to reshape how the world feels. Driving is rarely just about transportation. It is about timing, about deciding when to leave, where to go, how long to stay. It is about movement without explanation. When that ability fades, even gently, it can feel as though the edges of life move slightly farther away. Not all at once, quietly, almost politely. Many people tell themselves this is temporary, that they will figure something out later, that staying home for now is sensible. After all, there are fewer places to go these days. Energy changes, interests shift, rest becomes valuable. On the surface, staying in can feel like comfort rather than loss, but something else begins to happen beneath that comfort. Days become narrower without being empty. Routines repeat themselves with precision. Mornings look like the mornings before. Evenings arrive on schedule. There is nothing wrong with this rhythm, and for a while it even feels reassuring. Familiarity has its own kind of peace. What often goes unnoticed is how much of life once came from movement, from the small, unscheduled interactions, from choosing to step out simply because the option existed. Without that option, choices begin to organize themselves around what is easiest rather than what feels meaningful. This is not failure, it is adaptation. After a lifetime of solving problems, adapting becomes instinctive. You find ways to manage, you arrange deliveries, you call ahead, you make do. And because nothing dramatic happens, it feels like the right approach. Independence, after all, has always meant handling things quietly. Yet independence is not defined by how little help you need. It is defined by how much choice you retain. When driving ends, many people retreat without realizing it, not out of sadness, but out of courtesy. They don't want to inconvenience anyone. They don't want to ask. They don't want to seem dependent. Pride is rarely loud at this stage of life. It is subtle. It shows up as restraint. So invitations are declined gently. Outings are postponed indefinitely. Conversations shorten. Visits become less frequent, not because relationships weaken, but because access becomes complicated. Isolation does not arrive as loneliness at first. It arrives as quiet, and quiet can feel peaceful until it becomes empty. The most difficult part is that this withdrawal often feels responsible, safe, mature. After all, there are risks involved in being out and about. There is fatigue. There is uncertainty. Staying home removes variables. It simplifies the world. But simplification is not the same as fulfillment. Over time, the absence of stimulation begins to register in subtle ways. Attention drifts more easily. Motivation softens. Days pass without much distinction. The mind, which once responded to novelty and interaction, now works harder to stay engaged. This is when many people begin to believe that life is naturally shrinking, that this narrowing is simply what aging looks like. They accept it without protest, because acceptance has always been a strength. But acceptance does not have to mean withdrawal. There is a difference between respecting limits and surrendering to them. Driving may no longer be possible, but that does not mean the world must remain outside. Independence does not disappear when mobility changes. It simply requires a different shape. The home, once a place of rest between journeys, becomes the center of life. And that shift holds opportunity, not just constraint. Bringing the world inward begins with intention, not force, not obligation. Intention, connection does not require constant movement. It requires continuity, regular voices, shared moments, predictable touch points that remind the mind it is still part of something larger. A phone call at the same time each week becomes an anchor. A neighbor stopping by for coffee becomes a ritual. A delivery person who knows your name becomes a familiar presence. These moments may seem small, but together they create texture. Technology, when approached gently, can also soften the distance, not to replace human contact, but to supplement it. Seeing a familiar face on a screen, even briefly, can restore a sense of participation. It reminds the mind that relationships continue, even when logistics change. Purpose matters as well. Purpose is not about productivity, it is about contribution, about knowing that your presence still matters to someone, somewhere. That contribution might be as simple as listening, offering perspective, sharing memory, writing notes, making phone calls, checking in. These acts carry weight because they come from experience. Independence is preserved when days still feel chosen, when routines are shaped deliberately rather than imposed by limitation. Asking for help is often the greatest obstacle to this transition, not because help is unavailable, but because asking feels like crossing a line drawn decades earlier when self-reliance was essential. But reliance and dependence are not the same. Allowing someone to drive you does not erase your autonomy. It preserves it. Accepting assistance does not diminish dignity. It sustains it. Relationships deepen when support flows both ways. Others are often grateful for the opportunity to help, even if they do not say it directly. Allowing that exchange strengthens connection rather than weakening it. What matters most is framing, not "I can't do this anymore," but "I'm choosing a different way." Language shapes experience, so does internal dialogue. When driving ends, life does not become smaller by necessity. It becomes different by design. There is also grief in this transition, even when it is not acknowledged. Grief for spontaneity, for silence behind the wheel, for the sense of motion that once defined freedom. That grief deserves space. Ignoring it does not make it disappear. Acknowledging it allows it to settle. Peace comes not from pretending nothing changed, but from honoring what did. At home, comfort can evolve into engagement. Reading deepens. Creativity returns. Hobbies once postponed find room again. Conversations lengthen. Time slows in a way that feels intentional rather than restrictive. The home becomes not a boundary but a base. Some days will still feel quiet. That is not failure. Quiet has value. The goal is not constant activity, but meaningful presence. When the world feels smaller, attention becomes sharper. Details matter more. Moments carry weight. This can be a gift if embraced consciously. Driving was once a tool. Losing it does not erase who you are. It does not remove your voice, your mind, your influence. Those remain intact. The measure of a full life is not how far you travel, but how deeply you live where you are. Staying connected requires effort, but not strain. It requires permission. Permission to ask, to accept, to adjust, to redefine independence on your own terms. Life after driving is not an ending, it is a redirection. And redirection, when chosen thoughtfully, can lead to a quieter kind of freedom, one built on steadiness, on clarity, on relationships that endure beyond logistics. The keys may rest where they are, but life does not have to stop moving. It simply moves inward, where meaning still waits.